Well, welcome to the Unboxing the Office podcast. This is going to be our best yet, episode 8. I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit nervous about this one. I'm nervous, and you know that means something. I'm going to be introducing to you today my guest, Dr. Rod Berger, a global expert in strategic storytelling, and you know I like telling stories. This guy is the OG. He's interviewed more than 4,000 people, from Charles Barkley to Pope Francis. We're going to be talking about that story. He's worked with leaders and organizations around the world to use narrative, to build culture, to drive impact, and most important of all, to lead with curiosity. Veteran lecturer, media contributor, and now author. We'll be talking about the book, The Narrative Edge, that dives deep to make the case that authentic storytelling can transform the workplace and beyond. Dr. Rod Berger, welcome to the podcast.
I don't know if I've had an intro like that, Bernie. That is top notch. I really appreciate that. The energy in the room. I know people can't. They're watching us. Maybe they can't feel it. Maybe they can. I appreciate it. It's nice to be here.
I appreciate you for taking the time to sit for our podcast. I'm not going to lie. You're a big get for us. A big get. You've been around. Rwanda, Tanzania, Oslo. You're on the way to Oslo, right?
I'm on Stockholm and then Oslo, yeah.
I don't even know where to start. But, well, I tell you what I am going to do. I'm going to start with thanking our sponsor, Hot Logic, an alternative to the microwave. Your folks no longer have to be wandering into the fast food wilderness, subject to fast casual delivery and all the expense of that. In the office, a hot meal ready and waiting for them on their schedule. Hot Logic, eat happier. Now back to the program.
You're making me hungry, Bernie.
Right? Well, that's one of the goals of our sponsor. But we want you to, of course, have a hot meal.
That's right.
And no more microwaves. So my audience knows I'll never hesitate to make a gratuitous promotion. Okay. I'm a pitch man.
I'm ready.
But Dr. Berger, as I learned more about you and the work that you do, I'm not going to lie, I was impressed. I was intimidated. I thought to myself, this is a guy who's all put together. This is a guy who's had a rocket strapped to his back and didn't look back and straight to the top. But I have to think that's not the case. I have to think, like all of us, you've had your share of challenges. Can you share with us some challenges just to make us feel better about ourselves?
I was going to say, I don't know the guy you're talking about, but he sounds like he's fantastic in his stories. Yeah, of course. Absolutely. I mean, look, the premise of storytelling for me is rooted in not getting what I wanted, right? I mean, when I was a young boy, my late father grew up under the regime of Nazi Germany.
Wow.
And was much older. And so for me, and he traveled a lot for work. And I, as just a curious kid, I wanted to know about his travels. I wanted to understand it. I was a kid. So every time he came home, that door closed, the garage shut, I followed him into the bedroom as he would unpack, wanting stories, and he wouldn't share them because he was of a different generation.
Yes.
It just made me even more curious. So look, story is, the end result is always exciting, and there's some glitz and glam depending upon whose story you're capturing. But for me, I've experienced it along the way in so many different facets. I mean, I talk about it in the book, and that's been one of the humbling parts about writing a book is in the decision that I made consciously to include myself in it. So that when you get the book, it's not 7 steps to writing a story, right?
Sure.
This is, I want the CEO to read it, to understand how to be a better leader and understand how to craft and be a part of a story, but also take that book home and read it as potentially a husband, a father, a community member, and get different value from that book based on the different roles in their lives. One of the things that I do in the book, Bernie, is I talk about how I lost a business at one point in time. And I had to, and it actually wasn't hard for me to include in the book at all, because once I found that I shared the story of what had happened to me, I met so many other people that had had nefarious run-ins with people that looked slick on the surface, but were actually pretty bad in business. And so I found myself, and I take you in through the book into the courtroom as I'm fighting for my own financial life.
Wow.
Because I want people to understand this is not, I never liked this. I don't know about you, Bernie. I would think that we potentially are from the same island on this, but I remember going through school, undergrad, graduate school. The professors I really loved, one was the ones that would share stories, but two would be the people that didn't come across as if they were born in the role that they met you in. Sure. Right? That they had their own sort of grit. They'd been knocked down a few times,
yes.
Right? They'd been
yes.
a student just like you. And so I want people to experience every element of story in the different forms of it, because it's not an add-on. It's not something that you just throw into your calendar tomorrow or add on top of a conversation just to get something or leverage something or somebody. It's a part of your entire existence. And so I want people to have that. So this is not if they're expecting a book that is polished from a perspective of I'm going to march my way through and walk out of this in some robotic manner, it's not the book for them. If it's a book that you want to understand story from all points around the world, from the Magic Johnsons to the Pope, right. to refugees, to investors, to CEOs, startup, then that's the book for you, because I have to show my own warts and the things that I've gone through. Otherwise, I don't think that my stories have a lot of credibility.
Sure. Yes. But lost a business. What does that mean? Misplaced it, can't find it?
Yeah, I love the can't find it part of it. No, I mean, look, I talk about being in business and all of a sudden waking up one day and finding that what I thought was real was not, to include obviously the nuts and bolts of the business and the financials. And in digging, because I'm curious by nature, I found that my experience was not new. It
Sure.
wasn't fresh.
Yeah.
This had been a pattern.
Wow.
And I developed dear friendships that I hold today with people who we would be under the umbrella of fellow victims. And I would hope that part of that experience, not just in helping me to understand myself and the power of story, but was also understanding the impact I could have by sharing my story with people that had been in my shoes with the same parties.
Wow.
And what that did for them and their own courage, because failure or the perception of failure can be a very lonely place.
Yes.
And when you tack onto that financial ruin and or starting over or the prospects of that, you either, I guess, hide under the covers or you jump out of bed because you want to make sure that your story is told and is, maybe more importantly, represented. And the irony for me, Bernie, was so many people that I ran into through interviews, just through the work that I do, travels, that had been in my shoes outside of
Right.
the sort of the cadre of victims, as I said that, not victims because as of people, but of circumstance. So the business world, it's a dark, sort of the dark underbelly of startups is the promises.
Sure.
Right.
Yep.
And what people sign up for or sign on to that they're not either aware of, and or they're too trusting because they are the creator,
Right.
the idea maker. And when you're marrying that together with the logistics, the nuts and bolts of the business, there could be some very strange bedfellows.
Right. I heard the story of Dr. Phil, who went through a challenge with his business manager who stole lots of money, set him back. It's a story that you find is all too common.
Yeah. And so there's something that's comforting. And really, I don't give myself credit in sharing my story, because originally I kept it to myself, what I was going through and every battle that I had to fight. And then I had become friends with a gentleman in England. And through conversations about collaboration, he shared with me what was going on behind the scenes for him.
Wow.
And his courage basically gave me, in essence, that unofficial ticket to share my story with him, create community immediately, and then say, okay, this is what I needed to basically step up and out and rewrite or write a different or next chapter that is much more representative of who I am and what I intend to do and how I want to impact people.
Well, okay, so we're gonna talk about corporate culture. We have a lot to cover, and I'm trying to peel the onion one layer at a time here.
Yeah.
We'll get to that, but before we do that, just because I'm curious and I don't know the answer to this question. Shame on me for asking the question without knowing the answer. How did you get into the storytelling? But you're working with refugees in Rwanda. You're working with United Nations. How do you get into the story? Where's the dotted line to the storytelling business?
Yeah, so the storytelling really starts I was always curious. The one thing that my father would do with me, even as a young boy, like sub 4 years old, was turn on 60 Minutes, because it was something that he was international in his scope and sort of scale of his own life. And that was sort of a conduit to us connecting, because he didn't have all the skills to be able to do that. So that was sort of that ignited the curiosity in me. When I was in high school, I do have that sort of classic story of an educator that saw something in me.
Okay.
Now, to be clear, it wasn't that I had sort of fallen on the wrong path and got sort of, I found life in a better, more positive way. I had been the kid that followed the rules lockstep, right? This was an educator. He was my geometry teacher who he recognized something in me, and we're dear friends to this day. And he said, I think you ought to be a part of this nonprofit and help kids, right?
Wow.
So, okay, that's great. I was an athlete. I was working. But I wanted to help. And I'd already had some experiences of volunteering and contributing. And I felt that the power of that in understanding somebody's story, even if they were different from me, through several experiences. And I said, sure. Well, I joined the group, and then he's always been this way. Well, you should push yourself. Like there's something there. Push yourself.
Yes.
So he said, I think you ought to put together a presentation, because we're going to start going around to area schools. And I think you should speak. Speak? Why don't what does that mean? So that was really the origin of starting to craft and put together stories, like getting in front of a live audience. 16?
Nice.
Yeah, 15, 16. Started doing that. Then one day he said, I'm going to enter you into this national competition. Like he didn't ask, he would just do it.
Wow, that's so great.
So we did that. I won that. And so I started understanding the power of words, the power of a microphone, the value of understanding the audience that was before me, whether it was one person or many. And once you get that and you feel that, it is an absolute drug in that way.
Okay.
I've never had a drug in my life, but that is definitely a drug that I've consumed over and over again, which is the power of connection and the stories that can result from that. So that was for me the impetus. That was, wow, I want to be a part of this. But I would tell you, Bernie, getting on as a teenager, being a part of whatever speaker circuit, right? I started to see things that didn't feel authentic. I would recognize these speakers at these different sort of events and think, it's a little bit like stand-up comedy. Like I've heard your routine.
Yes.
And on a cynical day, it would feel more like their shtick, right? It didn't feel like it was like they were selling a product, good for them. But what's the shelf life of that?
Yes.
And so at that age, it didn't feel genuine to me. And I also started having the experience where I would have young people come up to me afterwards and say things like, I never knew somebody understood my spot in life, where I'm at. I'm in essence the quote, what they say is the good kid, but I don't get any, like no one's paying attention to me because I'm not causing a ruckus or impacting whatever normal is. And so when you have that kind of connection with a young person, even when you're a young person, I started to feel like I need to make more of a difference. It was exciting in those moments to be paid and get on an airplane and fly somewhere and speak and be 17, but it was also an empty feeling. So I appreciated the stories that I was a part of, but I wanted more of that. And so that's when I took the U-turn and I went into mental health. I wanted to understand this process. Sure. I had worked at something that not that I'm building my own country, but I will tell you, outside of mandatory military service, Bernie, I think every young person should work at a restaurant. And not just one, but a couple, because you learn so much about
combat.
Combat over, if it's happy hour, if we've crossed over the happy hour threshold or not. But every table's different. Every story is different. And you have to understand your role in that. If you're going to achieve whatever it is that you're wanting, higher tips, whatever that is, right? So that for me was the beginning of all of the stories. And then I'm happy to go through, but it really was a bunch of happy accidents. And I don't know if it still applies today, but I will tell you that I have been a yes man, but in the best possible way.
Sure.
I have said yes 1,000 times more than I've ever said no. Now, I've been burned from that, and some could claim I should have never gone into business as I did because I had to then go through, and there was a very difficult chapter of my life. But, it teaches you something along the way that hopefully I've been able to use and apply. But saying yes has been something that has been near and dear to me because, if you ever had this, Bernie, you randomly answer an email that comes in maybe like off schedule, like on a Sunday. And you think, well, I don't want to set a premise that I'm going to answer somebody's email.
Yes.
Or but it's a cold email, and you open it and you think, oh my goodness, because you've got that time in that day.
Always.
Right? And you do it, and then something amazing happens. Now, I don't know about your DNA and how you're made up, Bernie, but for me, that set it for me. Like it started, the yarn started to unfurl because in my own DNA, it's like, gosh, I better open that email.
Right.
Because it could be Bernie who is right down the street from me. And
you better open that email.
Right? And it's not just an automatic response that doesn't take into consideration the opportunity that our collaboration in this conversation might have, not just for us, but for people watching.
Yes. Wow. Okay. Take the next step.
Okay.
Now, personal story on my part.
Yeah.
My youngest son did a missions trip to Armenia. And, and everyone knows their podcast, the Youngblood Squared podcast. There's the plug. And I don't think he would deny this. He came back a different person because spending time, a 6-month missions trip, spending time in that environment, different culture, right? In Armenia, right? Can have an effect on you. Now, you, my friend, we've just met, but you've been to refugee camps, which is an order of magnitude more intense than forgive me for saying this, Josh, but a simple missions trip.
Josh, don't listen to your dad. I would say that, no, I think it's all relative. Yeah. I mean, they're all relative. I'm jealous that he got to do that. Like, I'm envious of that.
Well, it's an excellent experience. But check out the podcast. But how do you do it? I can't even imagine and we'll get to corporate culture and dive into that. But to take this first, how do you have within you the knowledge of what's happening in those nations? And by the way, I think you probably know how it happened. And still, you're able to communicate with folks who have no awareness or have worse, ignorance about it, and not lose your cool. How not get completely upset about it. Yeah. How do you do it?
I mean, a couple of different things.
You know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, look, one of the benefits, I can say this now about going through and getting my doctorate in clinical psychology is you go through this process of basically stripping away your opinion. Very broad strokes here, right? Because you need to be able to sit in a room with somebody and not make it be about you, right? So that's my old world. But if anything, that was sort of like a boot camp for life where you're in a domain and an environment that you're not used to, right? Whether it's a boardroom or it's a refugee camp. I think for me, one of the first things that I did, and look, happy accident. My first trip to Africa was in Senegal. And I was deep into the bush. I was on my way 7 hours into the Tambacounda region. I eventually ended up crossing the Gambia River on foot and sitting down with the imam and like some heavy stuff that I would have never thought I would have been sort of around. And on my way there, I had an opportunity to sort of stop off, and we were in a very remote area. And the look I got from some children, I've never had that in my life. I haven't had eyes like that on me from a first date, a wedding. Like, there's been nothing in my life, and I was told that I was the first white face that had been seen by these kids.
Wow.
The immediate, for me, response was this overwhelming sense of responsibility for the moment. And that does something. That changes Josh or Rod, right? Or Bernie. That changes you in a way where you say, I can't ignore what I'm walking into the world with. right? Whether it's my skin color, my experience, I have to understand that. And if I'm going to get anywhere, I've got to lay that on the table and be vulnerable and at least invite that. Because now I'm giving an opportunity for somebody who is coming from literally a different part of the world in experience, for them to say, okay, he's not that guy. And years ago, I don't know if any of us, you or I would have known what that guy or that person meant, but we do now, the younger generation. I don't want to be that guy. And so one of the things that I've done in my storytelling, and this applies again, I think this is what's so key, and I hope people get from the book is, again, this is not about someone who's who works with an NGO in a developing world, they need to read it, or a CEO over here that's in, manufacturing or whatever. This is about the human element of story and the application of that. I made a key decision after that experience with those young people that I wanted to ask what was the name that was given to people with a white face or a face like mine. Basically, take me behind the curtain.
Sure.
Because I have no doubt I wouldn't blame you for talking about me in a different language and I wouldn't know any better.
Right.
But I have no intention of being Clark Griswold, right? I mean, I may be waving at Big Ben 75 times, but darn it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it trying to be at least approachable, right?
That's great.
And what I found when I did that, I remember the recoil from people around me that were either European or whatever it was. They were not a local. It was as if I had asked something about somebody's mother or what. They couldn't believe it, like that I would either have the guts or that I was that foolish to do it. 9 out of, knock on wood, it has never not worked.
Okay.
And not that I use it as like a trick, but in sharing with someone, it's like last year when I was in Tanzania, in a very remote region, I'm sitting on this hilltop interviewing a grandmother of 18 who walks almost 6 hours a day just to get cleaner water so grandkids can take that water to school.
Wow.
And through a translator, I know that I only have a brief, discrete amount of time to interview her and help to tell her story around water insecurity. Now, I could be foolish and just sort of approach that and ask a series of questions, not connect with the translator, and it comes off as stale. And yes, we captured it, and it's good quote for me, but it does nothing for the story and honoring that story of her and that village. And so I wanted her to know that I'm just a Mzungu. And when the translator said to me, and I've had this happen several times, do you really want me to say that? Yeah, I want you to say that. That grandmother, the look on her face was as if I was her long-lost grandson she hadn't seen in years.
Mzungu? What?
Meaning white face.
Okay.
In Eastern Africa.
Sure.
So in Senegal, Tubob is what they would say.
Okay.
And so it was great because now, even though we had a translator, she understood that I'm being vulnerable. I know I'm not in my element. This is not about a colonist coming to Eastern Africa and the stories over generations of what that did and how it impacted culture. I'm just a human just like her and respecting her perspective.
Oh, yeah.
So those have been some of the most powerful experiences I've ever had, is when I've been able to connect with people at that kind of a level. And really, that's an approach I take, whether I'm interviewing someone over a digital medium like Zoom,
right,
or in person, is if I can be vulnerable enough to be able to be curious. I have sat in the room with CEOs that are, I guess, on the surface incredibly tough. They're all human. They all go home, have the same struggles. As long as I acknowledge that, I think I'm honoring them and the story that I'm hoping to capture.
It's important to provide a point of human connection.
It is, yeah.
And not remind them, but help them to understand that that you're just like them. Born to different circumstances in a different area with different opportunities, different obligations, responsible, whatever.
Yeah.
But as my faith audience would know, we're all children of God. We're all the same. And being able to admit that in their presence, which probably no one had ever done, was probably shocking to her. Perhaps, I don't know.
Perhaps. And look, the flip of that is a lot of people will, like, whether you're the founder of a startup or you're a CEO or you run a nonprofit, or a church group, whatever the group is, and you somehow have that leadership position, there's this notion that it's exciting and that you're filled with community. Those roles are very lonely.
Yes.
Can be very lonely. And, there's an acknowledgement of that in storytelling that says you're not just one thing. Like, you don't have to be that one element, right? This is about the characters that you play in the stories that you live. And so that means that you're not just your 9 to 5, or 9 to 5 doesn't really exist anymore, right? But sort of the notion of a work day. You're so much more than that, right? You are that when you go to the soccer field on a Saturday, or you go to a dance recital, or you're at the grocery store. Or a conference. You can't turn on and off your story. And I think those are the leaders that people want to get behind. And it's also the people that want to then share their story, right? You'll have well-intended leaders who will like kind of bemoan off camera or, behind the scenes, people don't talk with me. They don't share things. And you think, well, I think I probably know why, right? Yeah. And let's sort of peel the onion, to your phrase, right? And understand a little bit of that. Because if we can't communicate the human side of it, then I think we're missing the boat. And all we're doing is leaning into a press release or a marketing and comms team. And when you're closer to them than you are the people that represent what you're trying to accomplish, your story needs a rewrite. Yeah.
All right. So because it has to be answered, how do you get into the room with the Pope? Pope Francis in this case.
Yeah, the late Pope Francis. I mean, again, another set of happy accidents. That all goes back to I interviewed. I don't even remember the origination of the interview. I find myself on, it might have been a Skype back then. Just dates me, with an individual who had been at Harvard. I forget what he was doing. He had built this NGO around education and doing stuff around the world. Found him to be a very interesting, compelling guy that I would, if he had lived near me, I'd say, that's the guy that I would want to hang out with, right? Well, we connect, we do the interview, and I make a couple of recommendations for him, connections, whatever. We just start to build this friendship, through email and digital means. 2 or 3 years into this, we randomly get on a call to talk about something, not a formal interview. And the blame is on me, Bernie, because I find out not only are we from the same state of Michigan, but he went to one of the competing high schools in the city that I grew up in. And we had no idea.
In Rochester, Michigan?
Yeah. We had no clue. So I just thought, well, this is unbelievable. Like, it's such a small world, right? But I had no idea that we were from literally the same. He was a part of a high school that was built right as I had been leaving high school. So a few years older than he is. Because of that then connection, you form a stronger bond. He had been a part of a nonprofit that worked on refugee and migrant education that was tied to the Catholic Church. And you keep going down. I had talked with that founder and helped and aided in some things. And there was a conference on refugees, a summit, and I was invited. So it just kept, these relationships where, and I'm really big into relationships because you just never know.
Yes.
You never know. I could be speaking to a high school tomorrow, and that high school senior that somehow I connected with, and maybe we didn't even chat, but in 5 years they send me a note and they'll say, you won't know who I am because I never came up to you, but I was in the audience that day.
Right.
And then we go off and co-write a book that makes a difference. You just don't know.
Right. Serendipity.
Yes.
Okay. We got to dive into the real content here, right? For Unboxing the Office, for our podcast. Corporate culture, I'm going to suggest, is experiencing a moment of crisis. I'm going to lay that one out there. You can take a look at Bud Light, take your pick, Jaguar, what's happening with United Healthcare, right?
Yeah.
I would submit one of the challenges these organizations are having is other folks are telling their story for them. They've lost control of their story. And I also suggest there would have been a better way to go about all those things, but they lost control. I guess I should start, am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy at all.
Okay.
But I think this has been going on I don't think that there was one flashpoint. I just think this is sort of the evolution of it. I think that look, Daniel Pink is an author that, one, I'm a big fan of, and I'm just a fan of him because I had an opportunity to interview him a number of years ago, and he was kind to me when he didn't have to be. And since then, on a yearly basis, I might shoot him an email and he'll respond. But he's a prolific writer, New York Times bestseller, and he has this notion around, our challenge now is we're stimulus rich, but we're context poor.
Yes.
And I think the reason that I'm saying that, based on what you're mentioning here with corporate culture, is that there's so much going on that, look, if you don't start off with a pretty good relationship to your own story, and I mean that personal relationship that encompasses your resume, your LinkedIn, your achievements.
Yes.
Boy, it's going to get hard. You can't just flip a switch. It's like a sports team that they've won the championship. The next season, they're sort of lollygagging, and everyone says, no, they're going to turn it on when the playoffs hit. Sometimes that switch just does not. You can't explain
I'm a Detroit Lions guy.
No. I'm a big Lions guy.
Okay.
No. We can talk sports as much as you want. You can't just flip a switch and it will come on.
Sure.
So I think that that's part of it. And I think we are using sports as a bit of a parallel. We don't have the 9-to-5 anymore. We also don't have what a lot of folks, their parents did, which was work somewhere for 30 years. So we don't have that, what we thought was an obligation to stay connected to either that sector, that job. And so why does that circle back to the story for the leadership, or really the leadership team, to include corporate boards, which oftentimes we don't talk about, but oftentimes are what are driving or manipulating. Yes. I don't mean manipulating in a pejorative term, but to say that their actions, their desires are impacting sort of the sequence of events that maybe a leader has to partake in, is that you have to refresh or be thoughtful of your story, because you never know at what point in time that you're, in essence, representing the company, that it's a new hire that's in the audience. It's someone who's potentially getting poached. It's someone who's saying, I'm thinking about starting my own thing because I don't feel like I'm connected to the mission, if there's even one still in this company. And so your audience is so it's diverse, it's changing, and it's evolving. Yep. And you can't just rely on everybody here needs me for health insurance.
Right.
Because sadly, I think that's why a lot of people for years would stay somewhere. I've got to stay here because I have a family, got health insurance. Well, you know what? People have been sort of thrown in the dryer with rocks and boulders pertaining to their health insurance. And so they've found ways around that. And sadly, it's been where they haven't been covered. There are all kinds of elements. But I don't think the same affinity is there, the same loyalty. And some of that, I think some leaders they may have to take a big gulp and just say, it doesn't mean that we were a part of it, but we have to understand that's the environment that that in the play that's on the stage in front of us, we do play that role, whether we like it or not. Sure. Or we've been assigned that character. And that's why, look, there's a reason why, Bernie. I mean, just last week, McKinsey came out with a report about CEOs have got to be storytellers. You have to be the chief storyteller. I mean, this has been hard. If you read Harvard Business Review, I can't tell you how many covers they've had over the last 24 months. They're basically doing the old, it's like McFly. They're knocking on the forehead of the leaders saying, hello, do you see me? Do you hear us in here? You've got to be a storyteller. There's a reason why, but there's a reason why Wiley, the second largest publisher of business books on the planet, came to me and asked me to think about writing a book around storytelling, because this is what everybody's looking for. They're looking for a way to understand how to be more authentic.
Well, I guess I needed an answer to that. That's a question I need an answer to. Are executives concerned about this?
Absolutely.
Are they aware?
Oh, they're concerned about it. And this is why I'll get emails or LinkedIn IMs or cold calls from CEOs or people in leadership positions asking if they can have a conversation with me. And what I find out majority of the time is they're starting to think about hiring somebody like me on the side and sort of behind closed doors where they can feel safe enough to explore their story, the character they play in that story, and then how they may rewrite the story for their company and or whatever they're pursuing.
Good. That's a good first step.
It is. Yeah, I think it's absolutely a first step, right? They're putting oxygen to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm a marketing guy. So when I hear that, I think to myself, we now live, referencing Coldplay, in a nearly transparent world. Never be fully transparent, but nearly transparent world. And what I suggest to folks is a brand. This isn't my audience knows I love movie references.
Oh, me too. So this ought to be good.
So we no longer live in the Don Draper world.
Right.
Brands can no longer be built. They can only be revealed, because the truth is there. It's already there. And so if it's going to come out, whether through social media or some other means. And so the challenge being that story cannot be written. It has to be discovered. It has to be revealed. I don't
Absolutely.
know. Okay. I want to test that because
it
you're
has to be
an
revealed.
expert.
Well, no, look, you're exactly right. It's about revealing it because, look, this is a classic challenge. You don't have to be in the U.S., but any country where you're building a company, this is why. Look, they're in the lab, right? Or they're in their sprints with their dev team, and they're building something. They're building and building and building, and we're coming ready for the release, whatever. And then the C-suite says, "Okay, we got to get a press release out about it." Or we sort of like, now we need to tell the story, is what they're trying to say. And those are really frustrating environments to be in because you're acknowledging in the moment that you don't understand the power of what it is you're selling. And if you think you're selling just the bottle of water on the table or the pen or the app, you're not. You're selling a vision. You're selling a lifestyle. You're selling a value prop that says, with everything I have going on, Bernie, you are providing me something that adds value to my workday, to my process. But to me, we get so stuck in, I'm either the smartest in the room or my product's the best. It's the classic, if your CEO says, we're really unique, like, get the resume ready. Because everybody thinks that. And oftentimes it's the CEO that they've been in the lab so long. I've interviewed so many CEOs in my time and investors. And I always love to ask people, like, what's your exit plan?
Sure.
Because I learned early on that if you don't have an exit plan, and you sort of, I'll let the audience fill in the end of that sentence, right? Is that you learn so much about the way in which they think about the story that they're trying to tell. Like, why are we doing what we're doing?
Right.
And how does it impact the talent we want to attract?
Yeah.
Right? The first gen user base that leads into the second gen.
Yeah.
Right? Why do our vendors want to continue to work with it? Like all these sorts of questions that may feel a little bit scary to ask, but if you're doing it in an organized fashion as part of your process, you find that you could be much more efficient in what you're doing because you say, look, this may be this is why, by the way, it's still funny to me. You go to the C-suite and you say, guys, what do you sell? What's the business about? Sure. And they are proud and they sit up and they tell you exactly. And then you say, all right, I'm going to go, maybe I'll have lunch with some of the sales folks. You sit back and you circle back in the afternoon and they say, well, okay, so what do you think? What's our story? And you say, well, it sounds like you've got two different companies under the same roof. Because the sales folks have said, no, that's not the value prop. The only reason we get a call back or a response is if we actually list your 10th value as the first. Yes. And that to me is feeling uncomfortable in our own story and the process of that. It's not even... If you feel comfortable in figuring out your own process, Bernie, you're going to be able to go through that and say, this is my blind spot, right? I do love the bright and shiny. I just have to guard against that. It doesn't mean I have to change it. I just need to understand it. Because there are different types of leaders, right? There are leaders that can get up and command the room, but that doesn't mean that they can do a lick with a balance sheet. Right. So it's about how do you assemble your team so that you can extract the most out of the value that you have in that room. And a lot of that is again, I go back to, we're putting a play together, right? A school play. In this rendition of whatever show it is we're putting on, Bernie, I may need to be the oak tree in the corner. Right? You may need to be the lead. Or Josh needs to come back from Armenia and be the supporting character for this show. But how do you get there? You have to understand your audience. Sit in the front row, the proverbial front row. Sit in the back corner where it's harder to hear. I guarantee it will change your perspective on the story that you think you're telling versus what you are telling, and really like, what is it that you're delivering? Because sometimes we get too close. Right. We're too close and we don't understand we run the risk of falling into the orchestra. Right. And if we're too far apart because we just think the brand does it, it's already been revealed, we already have this recognition, you run the risk of continuing to walk backwards on that stage and falling into the lights.
Well, in that play, I'm going to be second lobster.
You're going to be a great second lobster, Brian.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this goes to a lot of the work you do. Because, the folks who watch this podcast are thinking about these things. You could probably spend 8 hours talking about this. But could you give us the hit list of the top 3 issues that you're confronting as an organization when you know it's time to consider taking a look at that story?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll put it in the top 3 in this regard, but what I'll say is that I think that we live in different timelines, different lanes. Think of it like a freeway, right? So if you and I are part of leadership, the lane that we're going in, that speed is relative to the timing that we're accountable to based on a product release, the stock, whatever, getting our earnings in time, whatever that is, versus the people that are helping to put that, in essence, that product or solution together. So the timing can be very different, and understanding that. Oftentimes we don't ask the right questions because we do it at the last second. It's the same thing about, well, hey, the product's ready. Let's bring in marketing and comms. Yes. And they're going, guys,
darn marketing people.
You should have told us 6 months ago.
Yes.
But if you make it a part of your ongoing process, if you have to pivot or you have to share tough information with your workforce, it's going to be received differently and more positively because you've had a history of being upfront. Now, I'm not ignorant. I've been on both sides. I've been in rooms with leadership, and I've been a part of workforces and captured stories of workforces. There are certain things you just don't. It's like a parent. Sure, you can be your kid's pal, right, and share as much as you want, but there is a threshold to that because you don't want to paralyze them over the thought or the anxiety of all the things that have really nothing to do with them just being a kid in the moment, right? Or you're working on a new product, right? We really need Bernie to be his best. Like, I'm not going to just dump everything on him about we're worried about what's going on because of a tariff issue, right?
Yeah, oh boy.
So it's understanding that, and then with that as your premise, backing up and saying, okay, what is the story we've been telling thus far? Twofold, not just to your consumer, to your workforce.
Yes.
Because oftentimes those are two different stories. So you want to break, what is it? And you have to be honest about that. And then you ask yourself, as a leader and as a leadership team, what character am I playing? I don't care. Look, there's a thing called positional power, which means you and I go to a cocktail party, if those exist, or an event at a conference or something, right? And part of the activity is I can't tell you my title. I can't tell you I'm EVP of this or CFO, right?
Nice.
I have to find a way to be able to tell you who I am and the value of me without the title.
Right.
Sounds easy. Sounds probably a lot easier after a few drinks, those sorts of things. It's really hard for people because we live in a world where our title means everything, which is why somebody's LinkedIn can look really polished.
Yes.
But be incredibly shallow underneath the veneer of the ones and zeros that put together the font and the type that lay out on your LinkedIn. So you have to ask those critical questions. Why? To me, look, it's not even a plug. When we think about the roles that should be a part of leadership, I think having something akin to a chief storyteller or somebody who is just a part of that. Because if you don't have that regular conversation where it's like, hey, Bernie, I understand. Just let's talk about before we put this together, before you go out and talk to the board, how are you going to lay this out?
Sure.
What's the audience going to say? What are they wanting to hear? It will change. It will allow you to become a filmmaker in your own world. You go, wait a minute. I'm more of a Christopher Nolan, right? Yes. I'm Interstellar.
Yes.
Or I'm a Stanley Kubrick.
Yes.
Because you now have an understanding of the way in which you experience the world around you and how you want the world to experience you. That's what I did for years with the Owen Graduate School at Vanderbilt, those students.
Yeah.
They would come in. I don't even know where this came from. I started with, like, hey, I want their resumes, right? So they would send it to me, and I would look at these sorts of things and think, okay. And I started recognizing patterns. I love patterns in strategy and chess. And I just started noticing early on, my goodness, I know there's more to these young people.
Sure.
Right? This is just the most exciting thing is that they speak a second language, like conversationally, and they know Microsoft Excel.
Right.
That can't be the most exciting thing.
No.
Because everything else is the same other than your name, your undergrad, whatever, right? But everything here in the middle, the meat of it, it's all the same.
Yes.
And so I would deconstruct and basically flip it all on their head. So they would walk in and I would know immediately, I would say, oh, hey, Bernie, what's it like having two sons, whatever. And you'd go, oh my gosh, who's this guy? Did he do intel on me? Does he work for a government agency? But I did it because I wanted them to know that I was taking the time. And that's a subtle thing in capturing the story. A lot of leaders will think, I've got to get up and I've got to have something to tell my audience, my workforce, that is going to motivate them, right? They're so focused on a data point. Ones and zeros are not stories. They are keys to the doors that open up stories, but they are not stories. So I would do that with these graduate students. It's like, look, I'm going to invert this, Bernie, and I would do research on you so that I could dig in and I would find that you buried the lead like in journalism. What's interesting is every summer you worked at a hot dog stand in Coney Island or something, okay?
How'd you know?
Yeah, and I want those stories because guess what? A hiring manager is going to want to know about that and your stick-to-itiveness while other young people are off having whatever they're doing and you are really sort of chipping away and trying to learn more about yourself. That's more valuable than whatever GPA you got at the University of Auburn.
Right.
And so that... I just would flip it. And every year, these young people would look at me, and then guess what would happen, though? They would connect with one another because they found out interesting things.
Sure.
Wait a minute, Bernie. So you did that on Coney Island every summer. I was working catering in Los Angeles.
Right.
You were? Oh, my gosh, do we have war stories? Let's go have a beer after class and talk about our studies. And guess what? When push comes to shove, now... I have a friend, a partner sort of in academic crime here to reach out to before the big exams.
Yes.
And guess what? We're probably going to give each other recommendations when it comes to our first jobs. That's how it happens because you're never going to connect over a resume, over bullet points. It's just not going to happen.
And you created lifelong friends.
That's exactly right.
All right. So can storytelling, let's get to culture.
Yeah.
Because right now we have a cultural crisis, right? But worse than that, we have a workforce crisis where we got a lot of unhappy people. Companies are making lots of profit and laying lots of people off. And folks are jumping on social media to talk about it. And I don't know about you, my feed is full of hundreds, probably thousands of people talking about, I just got laid off. And let me tell you why I'm upset about it. Yeah. And God bless, how much of that is true, I don't know. But here they are, and they have a platform. They have a microphone now. This is an issue. I mean, it's sad on its face because someone got laid off. It's terrible. But at the same time, now we have other folks writing that story for that organization.
That's exactly right.
If you gain control, is it possible? I don't know if it's even possible. If you gain control of that story, can you turn the tide on what's happening right now with social media?
I think over time you can build a workforce or a talent pool, right? Talent colleagues that have an appreciation and an understanding for the world that you're in. I'll give you an example. So he's become a dear friend. I did a profile on he's a very famous now Swedish entrepreneur. And I just think he's just such a fascinating human being, and he's a good person. And when I was there, we were talking last year when I was there about AI. And he had to be very upfront with a section of his group because they knew the job that they had was going to be basically cycled out because of AI.
Sure. And
he had a choice. Am I open about it? Do I find ways and give them opportunities up front so that it's not just, we're not doing something that feels happenstance and sudden? And I just thought it was a very thoughtful way to go about it, right? That it's like you want to be a perfect parent. You want to be a best friend. You want to be there when people need you the most, but there's sometimes you just can't show up.
Yeah.
Or you show up and you're not your best self.
Yeah.
And they're going to give you more runway and latitude if they've had a series of experiences with you that say, more times than not, Bernie gives me, you give me the benefit of the doubt, or you treat me with respect enough to share. I don't know.
Right.
Right. Look, when I was working with those students, a lot of the conversations they were having, even just 2 years ago, was around, how much AI might impact their ability in the accounting world, the evaluation world.
That's a real deal.
It's a real deal. And look, it's not my program, and I know programs around the country and world are dealing with this in the financial sector. What do we tell our folks?
Yeah.
Because I know when I interview AI experts, that's one of the first areas that's going.
Right.
Same with marketing, communication, all of it.
Truth.
And so you have a choice as a leader. You try to understand, one, the type of talent that you're going to need in a world where the numbers may be different, but that does not mean that the end result isn't the same or what we need as an objective. In essence, we need to get our word out, or we need to, flood the zone and whatever. So you might have the same objective, but in essence, what's that story look like? What are we missing? Is there a character or a storyline that we're not thinking about? Because I can either frighten an entire department, or I can say, look, guys, I don't know how this story is going to end.
Right.
I know how
nobody does.
Nobody does. I want there to be an open line of communication here and transparency in the way in which we build, where you can, in essence, it's like the notion of why can't we just get off the freeway and get back on the freeway?
Sure.
Right. So Bernie, you're open and honest with me, and you're, Rod, I don't know if this position or this department's going to be around in 18 months, but I don't know what it's going to look like. And I may need a different version of you that you want to be in that environment. Well, now you've opened the door for me to think about how I can participate in my own story. And you mentioned that earlier, right? That it's that whole notion of, like I talk about in the book, if I'm not in charge of my own story, boy, who is?
Right.
And so sometimes it's not that you have to have an answer. And that's the problem with living in a data-driven world, right? Where we're beholden to a board that's going to say, what's our stock price? What's our valuation? You want to push back on some of that just to understand, because if that is our target, it's going to be very hard to get the next generation. Look, there's a company out of Europe called Windo, Windo.cs, I believe. Windo.cs. I interviewed Ken Janssens. He's the former chief data officer of JP Morgan. Okay. He knows something about that world.
Yeah.
Prior to COVID, he was pulling all kinds of really interesting data about JP Morgan worldwide, and it had to do with really their talent and what are they looking for and the generational. COVID hit, a lot of people went through sort of these metamorphoses of what do I really want to do? And he realized, wow, a lot of organizations are going through these same challenges and having these similar questions. Hence the reason why he started Windo. And they're exploding. Why? They capture data from workforces and talent pools, top companies around the world. They're partnering with universities. They're finding out that, it's like the percentage of young people that before they come to an interview at your company, they check your Wikipedia page.
Yes.
They want to know, what am I signing on to? I'm not just signing on to a company based on profits or market share.
Glossy website.
That's exactly right. So they get all this data.
Right.
And at first you think, well, my goodness, I bet these companies wouldn't like this company called Windo and what they're... No, actually, they now lean into it because it helps them understand the story that they can convey, the opportunity.
Right.
Right? How inclusive are we? Do we even understand the people that work for us?
Right.
And to me, that's a hidden gem around the data or the information is so many companies really don't have I don't think they have a good playbook or roster of understanding who's playing for the team.
Right.
It's been so surface that they don't understand, and they don't continue to capture that story over time to where we kind of go, it's changing.
Yes. It's changing too fast.
Too fast, and are we prepared for that?
No, we can't be. We can't be. It's too fast, the pace. All right.
But intention is valuable, wouldn't you say, in business?
Yes.
I think intention is really valuable.
Communicating it.
Yeah, and communicating that means that if you've been a vendor of mine for years, but all of a sudden, wow, a wrench was thrown into the bike spokes, right? Guess what? If I know your intention, because you're Bernie and you've been my guy for the last 7 years, we're going to be good. We're going to figure it out together.
Picking up the phone solves a lot of problems.
There's a lost art.
Yeah. All right. Has this happened yet, what you're talking about, where a CEO has stepped in front of the, hello, my name's John Doe, CEO XYZ company.
Right.
We have a problem. We need to talk. Here's what's happening. We don't know what's going to happen next. Here's what we're going to attempt. Has anyone had that moment yet where they've stepped into the microphone and done the confession?
Well, that's a very interesting sort of twist on the question, the confession component. Because I would say to you, like if you and I were without an audience and these sorts of things, and you were a CEO asking about those sorts of things, right? It is important to understand the parameters. Look, it's chalking the field, right? How do you thread the needle where you show your vulnerability, where you don't have all the answers, even though maybe you've set up this predicament where everybody's just expects you're the answer guy or gal or whoever, and that now you don't have the answers, right? So again, if you haven't been, you've got to start somewhere. You have to start setting that where people can go, okay, they're going to take it in a different way. But you also want to be able to show leadership, which means you understand the big picture. You
Project
understand
confidence.
the power. You understand and can sit with silence and the unknown.
Yes.
And that's okay. Because too many people have seen leaders who act a little bit like squirrel, right? It's instead of dealing with the issue, especially in the startup world, they go from one thing to the next, and you turn around going, I don't even know where we're going, right? So yes, those things are happening. I don't know if I would consider them a confessional in that regard, but what I find interesting are the leaders that just talk to me one-on-one, because here's why. This is where we talk about a talent vacuum. Look, small sample size, so I want to be mindful of that. But there are plenty of leaders out there. One of the reasons that why they're really curious about finding and developing a relationship with their own story, and I'm intentional in saying developing a relationship with their own story, their own why, is because they're starting to have the exact experience that their workforce is having. Yes. I don't know if I'm connected with the very brand and logo that I work on.
Yes.
I can't say anything. I can't share it with a spouse. I can't share it with a leadership team because I don't know where that cliff is, and I don't want to find that as I'm slipping off of it. But it, to me, is a massive indicator of how detached we are from the stories that actually give us pause, that make us say, this is why I'm doing it, right? Like, this is why I'm in this business. Right. I had a mentor that did this, or, I had someone that marched me through and I felt value in that. And I want to make sure my employees feel that, my team members feel that. But there's a reason why so many leaders are struggling. That's why executive coaching is through the roof.
Yes.
Because why? These leaders need somebody to bounce off. What do they need to bounce off? Stories.
Yes.
They've got to they're pressure testing, right? They're QAing, they're beta testing words they're going to use in a difficult conversation with a fellow leader, with someone that they need to let go, with someone that they'd love to promote, but they don't know if they've got there are all kinds of things. And what are they doing with an executive coach? They are pressure testing that messaging. That's what they're doing.
I've had issues with the coaching business over the years, but I understand what you're saying. Again, being a marketing guy, I'm going to turn it around to say, what would it look like? I understand A/B testing and such very well. What would it look like to substitute that executive coach with their social media page? What I'm suggesting, which is crazy, and
lay it on me, Bernie.
And people know I am crazy, and I will own that. But let's talk about radical transparency. Don't go to your executive coach. Go to your Facebook, pick your social media account, and just out with it. The SHT storm is coming. AI is here.
I would give you a hybrid of that.
Talk to me.
I know several highly talented executive coaches that, my words, not yours or theirs, my estimation that they've either saved careers or they have drastically, in a very positive way, impacted the direction of a company because of their assistance in helping that leader understand the shoes that they wear, right? The impact that they have, and really pushes them in a sort of a safer environment to understand either their deficiencies or areas of opportunity. So with that said, I think it's a hybrid. Look, I think years ago, I loved it when Domino's Pizza, this is in the Michigander in me, came out and basically they started this ad campaign that, please don't quote me on this, but it was basically, we've been terrible.
Our pizza sucks.
It's been terrible.
Yes.
It tastes like cardboard. Just, we're working on it.
Yes.
Right? And I remember saying to myself, I think I'm going to order a Domino's
It's a
pizza.
very successful campaign.
It was super successful because it was transparent. It was the opposite of what Tom Monahan, when I was growing up with the Tigers and everything, right? And this notion of like, we're perfect. It had a very different feel to it.
Yes.
And so I think you can do a little bit of both. Look, the social media side, the challenge with that is people do not, they struggle. The very basic level is all they do is put information out about their product.
Right.
As if people are sitting there waiting for the next post about how their shampoo and conditioner are the best to hit the market.
I've done it. I've been there.
And that's always the easy. If someone says to me, hey, do you mind just taking a look at what our sort of brand voice is? And I do a quick scan.
Right.
That's the rough and dirty, to just jump in there and go, why? All I'm seeing is your product. Like, you're not even sharing information about sort of the market that you serve or research or popular press within that sort of ecosystem.
Yeah.
So they don't do that. So I think you can find a mix. Look, there's an example, and I write about it in the book, where I got to know a lot of leaders within Breitling, the famous watch brand.
Sure.
They do some incredible work around sustainability, in trying to understand the impact that their products, their watches have on planet Earth. And they have this incredible report that comes out every year now. I think this might be the third or fourth year, where, I mean, it is, and I've seen a lot of sustainability reports because a lot of now people are trying to understand stories based on that.
And this is the watch company.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's really thorough. I mean, you just go, they're not greenwashing, as a lot of companies are doing. Just make it look good, right? We have to sort of appease the masses that say that we care about if we've, I don't know, ruined a forest here or wherever.
Right.
Okay. Being a little flippant with that, but you get sort of the point.
Yeah.
And they asked me to look at it, and the head of Breitling in the Nordics has become a dear friend. And we were sitting down at dinner. He said, just tell me, what do you think? I said, look, you have glitz. You've got I think Brad Pitt once was an ambassador, Charlize Theron. You get all these
love it,
famous Giannis, like all these people will wear the watch. And so you have that from a luxury perspective. I said, but it feels like if you're wanting to capture the next generation of Breitling consumer, you're going to have to talk a little bit more about your why, because that up and coming generation is going to struggle to spend how many thousands on one piece of jewelry. Right. That they're going to want to wear all the time. And so I said, I think you ought to be like, more people should know that your gold mines in a developing country that you have, that you care for the community.
Yes.
You make sure that the mine is safer and that the local clinic has the best resources so that mom or dad who are working there can be present for the kids. They're doing amazing work.
Yes.
And they're just sort of, to me, emblematic of a lot of sort of challenges that companies are having, which is, even if they're doing everything that a Breitling is doing, and what they're doing is incredibly commendable, and that's understating it, the next step to that is sharing those stories. That's the transparency. Right. How did we get here? What mistakes were we making that led us into this new story or this new chapter or edition of our story that said, I think we could do more. Yes. I think we can push ourselves a little bit more. And by sharing the process and the journey, it's not about reality TV, but I think you give people in a consumer base another reason why they may then make that purchase. Yeah. Because that younger person's going to say, you're darn right I'm wearing a Breitling. And you know why? This is why.
Authenticity is the new currency.
It is. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that the sort of the partner to that is the vulnerability piece.
Yes.
Right? Yes. To your Don Draper point, right? Great show, super fun to watch, especially for those of us in generations where we either were close enough that you would hear stories or you lived it, or,
Yes.
But that's not the world that we live in anymore. No. And look, you can talk about leaders of all different types, right? I've interviewed several superintendents of school districts around the country, educational leaders. They had the same discussions with me off camera, off air, about their struggles. And also, like these individual CEOs that will reach out under the cover of darkness, right? They will want to know about how they can communicate their story and brand.
Right.
Why? For their next.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's one of those, I don't want to lose my affiliation with this school district or the company I run. But I'm also now open to finding an environment that really matches with my lifestyle now, where I'm at.
My brand.
My brand. That's right.
So we're over time. I've held you beyond the deadline here, but this is good stuff. All right. Before we close, we have to talk about the book.
Please.
Because you're publishing a book.
Well,
The Narrative Edge.
That's right.
Are these the subjects for someone who's concerned about gaining control of their story, who's starting to have some concerns about their corporate culture? Is this a book that they should be reading?
Absolutely, because I intentionally, I had to be authentic with myself. There was a turning point for me. There you go. We talked earlier about Senegal, and I talk about this in the book, but as that plane was approaching the landing strip, and I'm looking down at an environment and a landscape I had never seen in my life before, I remember making a very conscious decision that I was going to start writing and telling stories based on my experience, my feeling, right? I was the kid that could write a term paper the night before. I could do those sorts of things, but that's writing for somebody else. And so I took that notion, and since then, that's how my writing has been. And the book, to me, is an homage to the human experience. And you find me a CEO that says that they're a CEO 24/7, or that they're not a spouse, a parent, a community member, right? And I've got some ice I'd like to sell you, because they're humans. And this book is written for folks to be able to, and that's what's interesting. So through the process of publishing with Wiley, they've been a great partner, and now into the launch phase of it. And I'll do my plug later for where people can find it. But you start to figure out sort of who's interested in your stories. So, and I thankfully have a really vast network of people that I've interviewed and become friends with.
Yes, you have.
Because when you capture somebody's story, they stay connected to you. That's sort of that's the side benefit that you don't think about going in. Because you're listening to them, and who doesn't want to talk about themselves? And I don't mean that, right, again, in some offhanded way, but it feels good to be able to share our story. And I did that intentionally. So when the publisher said, look, let's send a few copies out to get blurbs and testimonials, that's like saying, who's your favorite, interview or child or whatever it is. And I just thought, gosh, I can't distill it down to 3 to 5.
Right.
So I just said, you know what? And I'm going to be vulnerable, knowing that what if these people that have, at least to this point, held me in high regard enough that they keep responding to me or interacting with me when I see them. I went ahead and said, fine, I'm going to put it out there, and let's just hope for the best. And I've gotten incredible response from people, CEOs, investors, and I mean people of brands, experiences, notoriety. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to understand how the book impacted people at different levels of their own life and at different chapters of their life. So that's why it's not the book that is exclusively just for the early career or the entrepreneur or the mom or the dad. It's no. You're a human being. Stories are a part of you. And that's what's been powerful, has been the feedback from people who've said, look, I picked this up because this is my professional role, but I couldn't put it down because it made me think about how I'm either bringing my story home in the wrong way, right, without benefit to those around me, or vice versa, or that I've just been detached. That's a key question for folks.
So in other words, buy the book.
There you go. So, there's my pitch guy. There's Bernie.
The gratuitous, we'll put all the details in the caption. Yeah. But for the audience today, how do you get this book? When's this book coming out?
So you can pre-order it now, which I had no idea about this whole process. You can pre-order it. It will be delivered. I think it hits sort of your front door or your mailbox on November 18th. Bookstores, it'll be in on November 12th.
Just in time for Christmas.
There you go.
Makes a great gift.
I will tell you that those that pre-order will get access to a lost chapter.
Wow. Okay.
To a lost chapter, and I'm very excited about that. And then probably Q1 of 26 is when the audiobook will be released. So I'm very excited about it. But look, I'll add this. I know we're over time. I will add this. I want people to understand. For me, people talk about Bernie like, well, what's your goal with the book?
Sure.
Sure, you want book sales, but not for the reason that you might think.
Of course.
I want them because what happens then is it gives me the creative freedom for the next.
Right.
To be creative enough and say, you know what, like I thought about the other day, like, God, I would love to sit down with people that I'd be honored and trust, the trust that they would give me or the family would, to talk to people potentially that are in hospice.
Sure.
Right, as an example, and understand their story, those sorts of things. I mean, there are a million things and ideas that I have and people that have asked to collaborate on sort of what a next book would look like. Those kinds of things happen based on how this sort of inaugural book does.
Sure.
And so that's the objective. I want to be able to reach and impact people enough where I can provide platform for those that otherwise would not have that platform.
I can't wait for that. So how can folks find out more about the work you do? Where do we go for that?
You just go to drrodberger.com. It's my handle for all the social media, including LinkedIn, my website. Hopefully you'll learn about that, but it's just drrodberger.com.
Berger.
That's right. So just DRROD and then Berger, BERGER.com, and follow me on Instagram. I will say this, Bernie, I try very hard. Heck, I mean, that's how we kind of got connected here, but I really try hard. If they're going to spend the time to reach out to me, ask me a question, connect in that way, I do my best to answer absolutely everything that I can. So if you send me something, it's not going into the old circular file in a digital manner at all. That fuels me. People's stories fuel me. And I never know when I turn the page or to the next day who I'm going to meet or chat with and be connected to. So.
Well, I can tell you, this has been an incredible experience for me. Dr. Berger is who he is. Same person on camera as you see off camera. The authentic one. And it's an extraordinary experience. Just because of what you've been able to accomplish. I am imagining, you're a young man, I am imagining what you have planned. You're going to Oslo next for this next, I think later this month. But I can only imagine what's coming in your future.
Well, thank you.
You're going to be making on the world.
Well, you're very kind, Bernie. You bring a lot of energy, and now I know why people follow you and have an audience, and it speaks to, I would imagine, the people that say, I've worked with Bernie for many years, and he is as authentic behind the mic, in front of the mic, when the mic's not even turned on. So I appreciate it. And look, we're part of a storytelling community, and it's important to share those stories. So it's been an honor to be a part of your show.
You're too kind. Well, on behalf of the Unboxing the Office podcast, thank you. On behalf of our sponsor, Hot Logic, thank you. That's a wrap for episode 8. This has been incredible. Stay tuned for the next one. I don't know how we top this.